नन्दिनि नन्दितमेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दिनुते गिरिवरविन्द्यशिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते भगवति हेशितिकण्ठकुटुम्बिनि भूरि कुटुम्बिनि भूरि कृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते सुरवरवर्षिणि दुर्धरदर्शिनि दुर्मुखमर्षिणि हर्षरते त्रिभुवनपोषिणि शङ्करतोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिनि घोषरते धनुजनिरोषिणि दिथिसुतरोषिनि दुर्मथतोषिनि सिन्धुसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Today we have a fun new way of doing things. So this is the second book that I'm very lucky to have received as a gift from Dr. Shomode. तो सीडबेड ऑफ पाकिस्तान का अभी तक उसके बेसिस पे पॉडकास्ट तो अभी तक नहीं हुआ. मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि मतलब इंट्रोडक्शन तो डिस्कस हो गया. अब बाकी बुक ना एक उसमें समस्या है कि एक ऐसा लगता है कि एक चैप्टर एक बार में एटलीस्ट एक सिटिंग में कंप्लीट कर लूं. तो उस बुक में है टोटल 2 चैप्टर. तो पूरा बुक मिला के 2 चैप्टर है. तो एक सिटिंग में बहुत सा पढ़ना पड़ेगा, इसलिए मैं अभी तक कंप्लीट नहीं कर पाया हूं. मगर luckily Dr. Shomode himself shared our discussion of the introduction of the notes I took on the basis of the introduction he wrote. Okay, मजे का बात है कि introduction I think was 12 pages and my notes were 14-16 pages. So that he shared twice on Twitter, and then he sent me this book as well to again discuss this beforehand a little, and then we'll have him on for a podcast to discuss this book as well, to do some promotion as well, because he is still not very popular, although he is the greatest living Bengali historian of today. And for that guy called Indian Political TV, who's from Tripura, bro, you need to invite Dr. Shomode as well, okay? Because every time I go on your podcast, you ask me what I think of Tripura and what I know about Tripura and stuff. No, and as I've told you that I have no clue about Tripura except that Unakoti Hills was there, and Rabindranath wrote Rajoshi on Tripura's royal family. But Dr. Shomode is actually a Bengali from Tripura, okay? But now, more importantly, I have not read, I think, more than 2 pages of the introduction of this book, okay? So that we are going to do discuss today, right now, as our first initial reactions as well. And I'm going to take notes and write down my questions that come to mind, which we will ask Dr. Shomode when he does come to our podcast to discuss the book, okay? And let me know your questions as well. I'll note those down as well, okay? The ones I find significant, the ones even I won't be able to answer off the top of my head. If they are such questions that absolutely need to be answered by Professor Shomode himself, then I'll write them down and we'll ask those questions to him when he comes on, okay? So let's start. But first of all, let me show you how the book looks, etc. This is a very thin book. I hope you all buy it. The affiliate link for the book is given in the description box. So if you buy the book from that link, it will be of some monetary benefit to me as well. It doesn't cost much. I think it costs about 499 rupees. It has come out from Occam Inc. Publications, Blue One Inc. Publications, जहाँ से Dr. Anand Ranganathan, Kushal Mehra, इन लोगों का सबका बुक आता है. And its cover design is by someone called Syed Dilshad Ali, and it's interesting because I very much like this plain white minimalism kind of a design. Okay, I have already kept in my mind that if someday I write a book, it's going to be in plain white with just some thin font as the name of the book and my name as well. Okay, तो वो ही डिजाइन ऑलरेडी डॉक्टर शोमोदे ने अप्लाई कर दिया है यहाँ पे. तो सैयद दिलशाद अली, बढ़िया इलस्ट्रेशन है ये. Now, one more reason why you all should read books like these by Professor Dr. Shomode is because he is a PhD from JNU. His sources will be very very legit, very very academically credentialed and stuff. तो मतलब academically well written. I mean, they might have their biases, their own narrative push and agenda and all, like every person has in the end, knowingly or without knowing. But uh, since he has those credentials already, you will be able to use his work and learn a lot from how to write history, especially the way he has written Seedbed of Pakistan, and then his other books, Becoming Hindus and Muslims. Oh my god, amazing, amazing writing style. You'll need to read those books. And if you all have read R.C. Majumdar, Jodhanath Sarkar, Radha Kumud Mukherjee, then you all know already, as some of my viewers have read. But make sure to read Dr. Shomode as well, and for that, another of the among all the other reasons, buy this book as well, and buy Seedbed of Pakistan as well, and very very short and concise books. So this book is called Being Hindu: A Political History from Aditya Chola to Narendra Modi. सो पीछे जो ब्लर्ब है, एक थोड़ा जिस्ट है, वहां पे बोला गया है कि बीइंग हिंदू अडॉप्ट्स अ लॉन्ग ड्यूरे व्यू, मतलब लॉन्ग ड्यू व्यू ऑफ हिस्ट्री एंड अटेम्प्ट्स टू contextualize the Bharatiya Janata Party and its progenitor, the Bharatiya Janasangh, as political phenomena by examining certain medieval state structures and instances of advocacy and popular mobilization in the colonial period. Very interesting topic, है ना? Further, it studies the politics of Narendra Modi and the policy initiatives undertaken by him as the Prime Minister of India to highlight their apparent cultural and moral underpinnings. Its eventual objective is to make a case for the historical authenticity of the Hindu mode of politics that emerged in post independent India. The attempt, in other words, is to demonstrate that it is a thing in its own right and not a cynical invention of hostility towards religious minorities. It's not an irrational or quote unquote fascist mindset or sundry anxieties, but in fact, it has precedents in frameworks and practices going rather far back in history. The BJS and the BJP are thus shown to be locatable in a long tradition of Hindus organizing their political practice or politics through cultural resources and the cultural imagination distinctive to them. Narendra Modi similarly brings an inclusive Hindu Catholicity and Sangathanist outlook to his politics and developmental agenda. Being Hindu in this way relates a brief history of the political expressions of being Hindu over slightly more than 11 centuries, from the ascension of Aditya the first of the imperial Cholas in 800 CE, until our own time and age. Another very unfortunate thing with Dr. Shomode is that his books have to come out from these publications. Now, when I say these publications, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Of course, I have bought Kushal Mehra's book, I have Dr. Anand Ranganathan's book, and they are good books. Although I have left Kushal Mehra's book at Mysterious Sociologist's house long time back, and I have not gone back to retrieve it. So, but the problem is Dr. Shomode deserves publications like Sage, Routledge, Brill and stuff. तो उनका बुक्स अभी वितस्ता से आ रहा है, वितस्ता से, और एक बुक जो है कॉनंड्रम, अभी ये बुक आ रहा है ओकम ब्लू वन इंक से. तो ये है अनफॉर्चुनेट, उनका पीआर गेम या फिर वो मतलब चिन्हित हो गए हैं एज अ राइट विंगर आई गेस. तो इसलिए उनका बुक अब वो जगह से, वो सब पब्लिकेशन से नहीं आता है. बहुत ही बुरी बात है. और फिर पब्लिसिटी भी नहीं हो रहा है. He is not even selling books like Dr. Anand Ranganathan and Kushal Mehra stuff because he's a serious academic. He's busy with academia work. कब सोशल मीडिया में प्रमोशन कब करेंगे? तो that's why I'm requesting you guys that do buy his books and you'll find a lot of value. एक तो है information, but the more important thing that we seriously lack in the non-left is writing skills. Okay, proper academic quality writing skills and proper citations. ठीक है, that you'll get from only people like Dr. Shomode. Nitin makes us. What did Nitin say? Oh, Tatvik has bought it. Good. I just bought the Seedbed of Pakistan by Shomode with your link. Thank you. Oh, okay, that argument. Okay, so let's start then. Let's see what he has said. Okay, it starts with a dedication to Hindus, an ancient and noble people. Now I can't read Sanskrit. I'll try to I'll read one or two words so that you all can understand what shlok is this. Okay, there are 4 lines of some shloka. Atulit baladhama hem shela mateham, I think. uh, Tanu. Okay, let's not waste time. मुझसे नहीं होगा. But interestingly, his book Seedbed of Pakistan is dedicated to his Ishta Devta, Prabhu Anjaneya. Acknowledgements है 4 लाइन का. I am immensely grateful to my institution Rishihood University for the constant support it gives me. I am grateful to this grand theatre that is life and my little quotidian role in it. I am grateful for the days and moments spangled with moon dust. Aha. Shekhar is saying dada basta utna hi. Okay, now introduction. Introduction is basically a gist of the book, okay? But you will get more juicy details in the rest of the book, of course. Introduction. Achin Vanayak, not Vinayak, Vanayak, a former professor of political science at the University of Delhi, is a passionate votary of quote-unquote secularization. He understands it as a process entailing a quote-unquote relative decline in religious influence and in the importance of religious identity. Religious influence or religious identity का decline होने को ही secularization बोला जाता है according to Achin Vanayak. Vanayak is of the view that if secularization is to quote-unquote proceed apace in India, it must quote-unquote address Hinduism or the quote-unquote beliefs, rituals and practices of the overwhelming majority of the population. Rather ironically, at the same time, he is dismissive of the centrality of Hinduism to Indian civilization and culture. ये तो एक मजे का बात है ही. Let me underline this. This is my first question to him, that why is he a little more pissed off with the leftist academics in some ways, or the mainstream academics? Why would someone start a book by criticizing or directly attacking another academic? Okay, the very first words in the book, first 2 words are the names of an academic. Okay, वो मुझे note down करने दो. Okay, why is he angry? But the funny thing that he points out is that मतलब इंडिया के सेक्युलराइजेशन के लिए कॉन्वर्सेशन होना पड़ेगा हिंदुइज्म को एड्रेस करके, बट एट द सेम टाइम हिंदुइज्म इज नॉट सेंट्रल टू इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन एंड कल्चर. ओके, यही तो हमने समझा है कि वो डॉक्टर कौशिक गंगोपाध्याय के बुक से भी, कि एट द सेम टाइम ओके, हिंदू, देयर इज नो सच थिंग कॉल्ड हिंदुइज्म. It's not a united religion. It's apparently divided into castes and stuff, gender, jati, religion, varna. ठीक है, मगर it's also so united that it's a threat to everyone, every other religion. दोनों parallel truths है. ठीक है, तो as he puts it, neither is in any manner, as he puts it, India is neither in any manner beholden to Hinduism. Expectedly, he is not very sensitive to Hindu sentiments, brazenly ignoring archaeological data. Vanayak avers that there is no quote-unquote serious empirical evidence that a temple once existed at the presumed quote-unquote presumed birthplace of Sri Ram in Ayodhya. He also, by the way, indulgently speaks of the Naxalites as the quote-unquote extra paramilitary left. Vanayak, in other words, is your typical quote-unquote left liberal academic, the sort who ruled the roost at our public universities not long ago. The likes of him combine an allegiance to Marxism as a set of heuristic and conceptual frames, with a commitment to liberal values and concepts such as democracy, civil rights, and last but not least, secularism. The left liberal stress on secularism typically takes the form of, as is veritably exemplified by Vanayak's positions, a rather jaundiced view of Hinduism. They would, as far as possible, like to see its social influence diminished and the Hindu identity eroded, so that the secularization of India is furthered. The left liberals' idea of secularism, in other words, seems to be the continuous social marginalization of Hinduism and the identitarian disenfranchisement of the Hindus. That is the goal of the left liberals, according to Dr. Shomode. Generally, in defiance of facts, they also refuse to see Hinduism as the historical basis of Indian civilizational and cultural phenomena. Yes, they are very unscientific in this way, although they understand it as a spiritual outlook in terms of its social mores, ethical and aesthetic values, etc. They deny, in other words, the distinctly Hindu or dharmic nature of these phenomena, even when it is obvious. They are also, as a rule, callous towards Hindu beliefs and react to them with barely concealed irritation. Okay? Irritation है, और irritation को छुपाते भी नहीं है ज़्यादा. Finally, as in the case of Vanayak, the left liberals might go to the extent of being indulgent towards left extremism and insurgency or Naxalism on account of their academic allegiance to Marxism. Understandably, the left liberals are extremely intolerant of any civil society or political initiatives that emanate from or represent a Hindu point of view, even when these are by no means sectarian or hostile to the adherents of other spiritual traditions. They are thus innately antipathetic to the Bharatiya Janata Party, henceforth BJP. So from now on, it will be called BJP in the book, which has, since its inception, oftentimes brought a Hindu perspective to Indian politics, like its forebear, the Bharatiya Janasangh. Now, people can obviously argue that they have not, in fact, and it's Maulana Modi, not Narendra Modi. Achin Vanayak, in fact, is so piqued by the BJP that, as it appears, he desires a civil society mobilization that would, quote unquote, halt and reverse its fortunes in the quote unquote arena of electoral politics. BJP ka fortunes, ठीक है? For him, the BJP represents Hindu communalism and is fundamentally undesirable as a political phenomena, okay? Seemingly meant as a Hindu hostility or aggressiveness towards other religious groups. This judgment is shared by the historian K.N. Panikkar, another member of Vinayak's tribe. So, in this book, Dr. Shomode woke up and chose violence. ठीक है, उठ के एक बुक के पहले 3 पेजों में ऑलरेडी 2 एकेडमिक का सीधा नाम लेके क्रिटिसिज्म कर दिया है. The shlok is in praise of Hanumanji, taken from Ram Raksha Stotram by Budh Kaushik Rishi. I see. Thank you. Rupa Shoy Singh, I want to rant a little about Raga's stupid speeches in USA, jaundiced view of Hinduism. ओफ, देवता का डेफिनेशन सुना मैंने आज, वाह वाह. तो देवता का मतलब है कि जिसका कोई इनिबिशंस नहीं होता है, जो दिमाग में आए ओपनली बक देता है, वही है देवता. So this judgment is shared by the historian K.N. Panikkar, another member of Vinayak's tribe. He peremptorily terms the BJP a quote-unquote communal party. That is because in his view, its quote-unquote methods of mobilization and goal are both communal. He also calls it a party that displays fascist tendencies, quote-unquote, in the sense of using quote-unquote force and resorting to irrational politics. Okay? अब मैं बार-बार quote-unquote नहीं बोलूंगा, सुनने में irritating लगता है तो मैं हाथ में दिखाऊंगा, ठीक है? Henceforth. So further, according to Panikkar, the BJP is inherently hostile towards minorities and discriminates against and marginalizes them. The academics who are not your run-of-the-mill Marxists are also generally averse to the BJP. A case in point is Ashutosh Varshni, a political scientist like Vanayak. Based on how he assesses the BJP in one of his academic articles, it appears that in his understanding, its politics trace their roots to the anxieties induced by the separatist movements in Kashmir and Punjab, since they posed a serious threat to the territorial integrity of India and hostility towards India's principal minority, the Muslims. Varshni, in this way, partly reiterates Panikkar's position, and then there is his French colleague, Christophe Jaffrelot. It suffices to say that a studied demonization of the BJP has been the veritable leitmotiv of his career. तो अब स्टडीड ग्लोरिफिकेशन या डिमोनेटाइजेशन तो ये गवर्नमेंट नहीं करेगा किसी का, तो ठीक है, ऐसे ही पॉप बुक्स में ऐसे ही समझना पड़ेगा. This book disagrees with the foregoing points of this view. It is, however, not an apologia for the BJP, the largest political party in the world, purely based on voluntary participation and membership, does not require an apologia. As of today, the BJP is rather more than a mere political party. It is something of a popular movement. Going beyond simplistic activist condemnation or exuberant endorsement, this brief study adopts a longue durée view of history and tries to properly contextualize the BJP and its progenitor, the Bharatiya Janasangh, as political phenomena by examining certain medieval state structures and instances of advocacy and popular mobilization in the colonial period. तो हमको तो भाई डिफेंड भी नहीं करना है, हमको अनफेयरली क्रिटिसाइज भी नहीं करना है, मगर हम इसको डालना चाहेंगे एक लॉन्ग ड्यूरेशन, एक बर्ड्स आई व्यू ऑफ हिस्ट्री में, कि ऐसे ही स्टेट स्ट्रक्चर्स, ऐसे ही टाइप के एडवोकेसी क्या पहले भी हो चुके हैं. He obviously claims that हो चुके हैं, तो we'll see what are the similarities in a general Indian kind of statesmanship or state running. colonial period. Further, it studies the politics of Narendra Modi and the policy initiatives undertaken by him as the Prime Minister of India to highlight their apparent cultural and moral underpinnings. Moral underpinnings. The eventual objective of this book is to make a case for the historical authenticity of the Hindu mode of politics that emerged in post independent India. The attempt, in other words, is to demonstrate that it is a thing in its own right. Okay, कि ये Hindu mode of politics is a thing in its own right and not a cynical invention issuing from hostility towards non-Hindus, or it's not an irrational or fascist mindset or sundry anxieties, but has precedents in frameworks and endeavors going rather far back in history. The Bharatiya Jansangh and the BJP are thus shown to be locatable. Okay, इनको हम locate कर सकते हैं. Locatable locatable in a are thus shown to be locatable in a long tradition of Hindus organizing their political practice or politics through cultural resources and a cultural imagination distinctive to them. Narendra Modi, similarly, this book argues, brings an inclusive Hindu Catholicity and Sangathanist outlook to his politics and developmental agenda. In this manner, it relates a brief history of the political expressions of being Hindu, focusing chiefly on the tangibly realized, practiced, and undertaken in the social world. Texts, though occasionally alluded to, are thus not taken up for discussion. From the ascension of Aditya I in 870 CE, the first of the imperial Cholas, until our own time and age, the period considered by it extends over slightly more than 11 centuries. The Cholas are the outset for this narrative, since they and the realm they ruled were, as it seems, the full-blown fruition of a dharmic framework of kingship and political organization. As it is, the imperial Chola polity has been postulated as the dharmic realm by the historian Bertenstein. Can the Cholas and their subjects be retrospectively identified as quote-unquote Hindus, by the way? This is, I guess, Nitin's question, okay. They, after all, did not use the expression Hindu, quote unquote Hindu, to self identify and underline their adherence to a spiritual outlook and concomitant cultural practices, the basis on which we have posited and apprehended Hindus for most of the period under consideration. It simply was not in currency in the Indic civilizational space in these senses when the Chola Imperium began to take shape at the threshold of the second millennium. Nevertheless, the Cholas and the society they ruled may indeed be determinately termed Hindu in terms of their spirituality and culture. हो गया नितिन का प्रश्न का उत्तर. This is due to the deities and the charismatic figures they worshipped and the devotions they performed. In other words, as we shall see, every element of popular Hinduism as known today is represented in the religiosity of the Chola sovereigns and those inhabiting their realm. We take off from a simple premise, elaborated in the next chapter, that the political practice informing or organizing a state is culturally colored or formulated. ये वैसे थोड़ा अंडरलाइन करने दो क्योंकि नितिन जैसे लोगों को बार-बार तो उत्तर देना पड़ता है. We take off from a simple premise, elaborated in the next chapter, that the political practice informing or organizing a state is culturally colored or formulated, because yes, this was his argument in his previous book, Seedbed of Pakistan as well, that states are culture dash power, culture power formations. तो ठीक है, कल्चर और पावर का एक नेगोशिएशन, एक कॉन्वर्सेशन के बेसिस पे ही कोई भी स्टेट का एग्जिस्टेंस होता है. तो कल्चर क्या होगा, पावर का नेचर कितना होगा, वो अलग प्रश्न है, मगर कल्चर और पावर के बिना ये दोनों मिला के ही स्टेट होगा. इन दोनों के बिना कभी स्टेट नहीं होता है. वो स्टेट ज्यादा दिन टिकता नहीं है अगर वो कल्चर और पावर के एक एमलगमेशन के बेसिस पे ना हो. तो वी टेक ऑफ फ्रॉम, तो अगर तुमको मतलब अभी समझ लो अभी पावर में आना है, मगर योर पर्सनल पॉलिटिक्स और कल्चर हैज नथिंग टू डू विद इंडिया, देन ऑफ कोर्स यू विल ट्राई टू modify India's culture. You'll try to do kind of academic engineering and stuff. You'll fund people to display or to talk about India in a certain way, which will help other people to come to power. और या फिर लिबरल पार्टीज जैसे कि पावर में रहते हैं कि ऊपर बोल देंगे कि हम भाई एथीस्ट है, लिबरल है, सब कोई मतलब they will not show their Hindu character at the top of the food chain, but ground level पे हर नेता will be a devout Hindu, जैसे कि हर लिबरल पार्टी, हर कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी भी चलता है हर स्टेट में इंडिया में. So states in this sense, it is argued, are culture power formations. This was his argument in Seedbeds of Pakistan as well, where he fantastically argued how that Islamicate culture was furthered in India, and how that led to how dilution of that Islamicate culture led to anxieties in elite Muslims, which then created Pakistan. Okay, that was his phenomenal argument in the book, which I have not read fully, but I've understood the core argument at least. And the idea of Islamicate culture you can see in Bollywood. Okay, कि इसके लिए तुमको मुस्लिम बनना नहीं है, इसके लिए तुमको मतलब इस्लाम को भी प्रेज नहीं करना है डायरेक्ट, बट इस्लाम एडजेसेंट जो सब कल्चरल आर्टिफैक्ट्स है उसको तुम सेलिब्रेट करने पे अगर मतलब उठ जाते हो, अगर तुल जाते हो, ठीक है, if you feel the sort of consensual urge to celebrate Islam adjacent cultures, then you are part of that Islamicate culture, as a term coined by historian Marshall Hodgson in his seminal 3-volume book, 3-volume work called History of Islam. ठीक है, तो examples of Islamicate culture is exactly what Bollywood is, like the obsession with Sufi poetry, Sufi music, Sufi shairi, Urdu poetry, everyone calling him something bhai. Okay, and then the obsession with pronouncing Urdu properly, forgetting every other language. In Bollywood, there will be if any song has 10 words, 8 of them will be words that nobody in the country understands except people who understand some Urdu. Illahi mera ji aaye aaye. Who knows what that means? And then the obsession with the pronunciation of h, it has to be properly it can't be kh or her. So those kinds of things, these are parts of the Islamicate culture. So states in this sense, it is argued, are culture power formations. That is, they use culture understood as a symbolic system or realm of signifiers. So states use culture to organize governmentality or lend cogency to their power enforcing strategies. Power enforcing strategies, ये बहुत बढ़िया एग्जाम्पल है, बहुत बढ़िया चॉइस ऑफ वर्ड्स है. Simply put, states use culture as a means to achieve cohesion and broadcast their authority in the societies they oversee. So you could argue that the culture largely let's say promoted by the quote unquote secular parties is basically Islamicate. If not, it's somewhat of a mixture between Islamicate and some soft Hinduism. This and of course largely Western and Christian in nature as well in some contexts. So society, authority in the society. The alliance of state and culture occurs because both are frameworks to regulate human conduct or behavior. ये तो होना ही है. Today, it typically takes the form of the linguistic nation state. Prior to its emergence, too, states patronized languages if they were specifically redolent symbols of cultural power. Like ancient and early medieval Indian polities, for instance, were closely linked to Sanskrit, as was the Mughal Empire with the Persian language. More usually, however, pre-modern polities sought to organize and implement their authority through religious symbolism. The noted political scientist Francis Fukuyama, as a matter of fact, seems to identify religion as one of the likely motivators of state formation. Rulers in the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire thus closely associated with Sufi holy men to partake of their spiritual charisma, constructed monumental mosques, and framed their will with regard to the moral discourse of Islam by, for instance, occasionally demolishing temples and prohibiting the construction of new temples so as to limit the public cultural displays of the Hindus. Another point that he had touched upon in Seedbed of Pakistan as well. In these ways, it is contended two imperial polities were quote-unquote Islamicate in terms of their cultural persona. Again, in the context of medieval Europe, we may identify the Holy Roman Empire as a distinctly Christian polity in the way of its semiotics. Semiotics का exact मतलब तात्विक जी जरा हमको कमेंट सेक्शन में डेफिनेशन बोल दीजिए, ठीक है? सेमियोटिक तो मतलब बेस्ड ऑन symbology sort of thing. So the Holy Roman Empire was a distinctly Christian polity in the way of its semiotics. The Holy Roman emperors posed as exemplars of Christian piety, sacralized their realm from a very Christian point of view, and sought exclusive control over the clergy, the earthly representatives of the Christian deity. Pre-modern state forms such as the Delhi Sultanate, Mughal Empire, and the Holy Roman Empire thus are identified as distinct culturally specific instances of political practice from the point of view of the symbolism they assumed. Going from here, the chapter apprehends and examines the cultural symbolism inhering in three instances of Hindu political practice, namely the Chola and the Vijayanagar empires and the Maratha polity. ये मेरे लिए बहुत अच्छा होगा क्योंकि अब मैं थोड़ा बहुत एटलीस्ट कुछ मतलब इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्टर्स जानता हूँ विजयनगर एम्पायर के बारे में, और मराठा हिस्ट्री के, मराठा कॉन्फिडेंस के बारे में तो जान ही रहा हूँ वो वीर सावरकर का बुक हिंदू राष्ट्र दर्शन से, मगर चोलाओं के बारे में मुझे कुछ भी नहीं पता है एक्सेप्ट दैट दे इन्वेडेड annexed Southeast Asia because some business problems. The Chola sovereigns were avid temple builders. Aditya the First, for example, is said to have lined the banks of Kaveri with shrines dedicated to Bhagwan Shiva, and then might have used ritual as a means to formulate their authority. As it were, it served as a political language of sorts in their hands, obviously. Before the Chola polity had become an imperium, the early Chola rulers, it has been contended, were primarily warrior chiefs and leaders of hosts who projected magnificence through land grants and by participating in public rituals. This was a stage when Chola kingship functioned in the quote unquote heroic framework. It began to transition to the quote unquote incorporative framework during the reign of Parantaka I, 907 to 955 CE. He funded the large-scale construction of temples in, as it appears, a magnificent display of dana. This apparently served to co-opt the underlying society by providing a focus to popular religiosity. By and by, the temple and the royal palace, as well as the temple deity and the king, were closely associated. The expressions of Koil and Udayur, Koil and Udayur or Perumal came to signify both. Further, vast landed estates were put at the disposal of temples that lent them an important place in the agrarian economy. And we learned from Irfan Habib's paper as well that one of the reasons for the giant respect and say that Brahmins enjoyed in society was because of the grasp of the calendar. क्योंकि एग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी है तो कब कौन सा मौसम आएगा वो जो बोल पाएगा उसके ऊपर तो मतलब और भी डिपेंडेंसी होगा ही. Ifin is saying no, not economic reasons. The reasons were Buddhist harassing Shaivites. This is always the case between Buddhists and Shaivites. Be it okay. You are saying in matlab contradiction to this claim made by Dr. Shomoda here, right? So then state your sources as well. Further, vast landed estates were put at the disposal of temples that lent them an important place in the agrarian economy. Temple establishments in the Chola realm in this way came to organize agrarian production and alienate the surplus produce. Temple establishments in the Chola realm came to organize agrarian production and alienate the surplus produce. Finally, it seems the Chola realm might actually have cohered through cultural symbolism. As understood by Bertenstein, the Chola sovereign acted as the most exemplary patron of Brahmins and temples, and was emulated in these capacities in the constituent units of the empire, the Nadus, Dravida Nadu, Tamil Nadu, etc., Tulu Nadu, the Nadus or agricultural micro-regions by the peasant communities and their chiefs. In this way, he argues, Chola kingship was created and maintained through rituals. This is an interesting factoid. Temple establishments in the Chola realm came to organize agrarian production and alienate the surplus produce. Okay, now what Nitin is saying here is sort of the Louis Dumont view. बायोग्राफी उसका ही लिखा जा सकता है जिसने पहले अपना खुद का ऑटोबायोग्राफी लिखा हो. This is the argument, okay? Semiotics pertains to symbolism and their studies, right? The significant instrumentalities were discharged by temple establishments in Imperial Vijayanagar too. They, for instance, were responsible for the expansion of its agrarian economy through their investments in irrigation works. This very self-consciously Hindu polity, its rulers would go on to term themselves Hindu Raja Suratrana, or I don't know how to pronounce this, which will be and which will be Hindu Raja Suratrana. So I guess the Vijayanagar Empire were Vaishnavites, right? That's one fun fact. So its rulers would go on to term themselves Hindu Raja Suratrana. Also had a state deity in Virupaksha, a form of Bhagwan Shiva. Yeah, then they can't be Vaishnava. I don't know. I had heard that at least Raja Krishnadev Rai was Vaishnava. At a point, the important state documents of Vijayanagar would even carry Virupaksha's signature, quote unquote signature. It was almost like he actually ruled the realm with his sanction, obviously. And the king was only his vassal. या तो टेम्पोरल अथॉरिटी हम स्पिरिचुअल अथॉरिटी से लेते हैं, यही समाज का नियम था तब. Vijayanagar, the imperial city, eventually came to be dotted with major royally commissioned shrines, which gave it the appearance of a ritual center. The authority of the Vijayanagar sovereigns, it seems, was legitimized and augmented through association with the deities housed in them. The most important of these, the Hazara Rama temple, might have served as the state chapel and established a homology between the ruler and Sri Rama and his realm and Ayodhya. A further aspect of the imperial city's status as a ritual center was that it was annually the site of a grand ritual performance in the form of the Mahanavami celebrations. My favorite part of Vijayanagar, at least Hampi's sculpture, even though I've never been to that place, and I heard recently from a friend that it's pretty costly to go there and stay there. So is that sculpture and that semi-demolished sculpture of Lord Hanuman in Hampi, a distinct kind of architecture for Hanuman, and that exists only in Hampi. That's fascinating to me. Extending over 9 days and bringing the Nayakas in attendance, as understood by Nicholas Dirks. These helped the Vijayanagara rulers to incorporate the quote-unquote disparate elements of the realm into their quote-unquote sovereign being. The close association of the Vijayanagar court with mathas further strengthened the sacral character of the imperial city. So, dekho, this is the one thing we have to notice that this current government doesn't do. I think in the history of humanity, Narendra Modi government is the first government which is so वो मतलब pro subaltern. It wants to show off its solidarity with the subaltern to such an extent कि ये लोग भूल गए हैं कि मेटाफोरिकली भी ब्राह्मण भोजन करना पड़ता है. Every king, every prime minister, every president in the history of humanity has done it. Okay, कि तुम अगर राज्य चलाओगे, तुम्हारा बात बोलने के लिए कोई चाहिए. तुम्हारा बात बोलने के लिए अब तुम भोसरी वालों को बिठा सकते हो. That kind of Narendra Modi does do, but you have to put in able people to further your arguments. ठीक है, आधे तो मतलब नरेंद्र मोदी के सपोर्टर्स को भी पता नहीं कि उनका आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या है किसी सिचुएशन में. पूरा ही मिस्ट्री है, एक एनिग्मा है, वो एक एम्बिग्यूटी है, और जिसको मिसअंडरस्टैंड करना है करो. कोई फैशिस्ट बोलो, कोई मौलाना मोदी बोल के भाग भी जाओ. तो ये है एक अजीब सबऑल्टर्निज्म which I personally dislike. But let's see how Dr. Shomodev puts it. Lokavya, it's going on in our membership live streams. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is your knowledge about Hindutva? Depends on what you mean by Hindutva. Raja Shurat Rana. Oh, okay. With that exact logic given. Okay. So its ritual significance. The close association of the Vijayanagar court with mathas further strengthened the sacral character, meaning the sacred kind of the sacral character of the imperial city. Its ritual significance meant that the holy chiefs or the Nayakas dominating the peasant communities would seek to associate the village shrines they patronized with the great shrines located therein. Since the Vijayanagar sovereigns enjoyed at best only a tenuous hold over them, and they appropriated a significant portion of the fiscal resources of the state, this phenomenon served to integrate the realm in a ritual framework. ये integrate the state. This is one of my favorite aspects of Hindu society. This way of accommodating different kinds of thought processes and beliefs. Someone was saying, I think Dr. Conradus was saying in a beautiful way that this Vedic civilization, calling yourselves Bharatiyas, okay, meaning we are sons of that famous Bharata tribe, okay. It's not colonization, it's not Aryan invasion, it's sort of an invitation that here's a template. कि जब Bharata wins the Battle of Ten Kings, Vishwamitra, who was the priest of the opposing tribe, all of them, all of their deities get a seat when they win the war, and they say that yes, युद्ध होने का था, हो गया, अब हम एक साथ मिलके एक सुराज्य चलाएंगे. That is the template that Hindus and India forever and after uh, went on pursuing. That's absolutely beautiful. And even if it wasn't there, it deserved saving, but at least it, this much convinces me to be a person who wants to contribute in some way or to some degree or the other, to whatever amount I can, to preserve this culture. So since the Vijayanagar sovereigns enjoyed at best only a tenuous hold over them, and they appropriated a significant portion of the fiscal resources of the state, this phenomenon served to integrate the realm in a ritual framework. Contending with two Islamicate polities, the Mughal Empire and the Sultanate of Bijapur, through great daring and enterprise, Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, 1630 to 1680 CE, carved out a Swaraj and eventually had himself crowned on 6th June 1674 CE. The visual choreography leading up to and surrounding the coronation was such as to establish him as the archetypically pious and munificent Kshatriya Raja. मगर उसके ही डिसेंडेंट को बोला गया कि तुम भाई क्षत्रिय नहीं हो. Chitpavin Brahmins of later years declared that Shahu Maharaj is not Brahmin. He is not Kshatriya. He first had Gaga Bhatta, a learned Brahman from the Banaras, endow him with the sacred thread and declare him a Kshatriya of the purest lineage. Shivaji also offered worship at the major shrines in his realm at the day of coronation, as the day of coronation approached. The coronation itself, performed as it was by a posse of Brahmins and framed in deeply evocative Hindu symbolism, was a very quote-unquote Sanskritic affair. He even gave Sanskrit titles to his ministers, avoiding the Persian ones that were then in usage for state functionaries. Shivaji had been, as a matter of fact, attempting to represent the ideal of Hindu kingship much prior to his coronation. He, for instance, was converting the revenue holding into a memorialized homeland through association with the Marathi saints and conscious gift-giving. Maratha power ebbed after Shivaji's death, and when it again revived in the 18th century, it continued to manifest a very Hindu appearance. The Peshwas thus lined the sacred rivers with temples, bathing ghats, and schools in which scriptural training was imparted. Again, the contemporary rival of Banaras as a built landscape was mainly due to the Marathas. The Peshwas embellished it with a number of ghats, just as the Vishwanath temple was resurrected by Maharani Ahilyabai Holkar of Indore, 1725 to 1795 CE. At this time, the Maratha polity also actively intervened in the quote-unquote caste matters of its subjects and, as we term it, disseminated its idea of cultural justice in their midst. Hindu Padpadshahi Divas, yes. Medieval Hindu political practice was in the corporative framework. For instance, the two imperial polities examined above, the Chola and the Vijayanagar realms, were primarily based on two corporative units, the peasant groups and the Nayakas dominating them. These were in turn overseen by the ruler from a corporative location. He did so as the brave and generous Kshatriya par excellence. Shivaji too addressed his realm from a corporative vantage point, going to great lengths to assume the role of the perfect and munificent Kshatriya ruler. As colonial rule set in, however, Hindu politics began to emerge in a fresh framework, that of quote-unquote communitas, an ideologically formulated sense of the oneness of all Hindus regardless of social or cultural specificities. This is the Bonkim, Chandranath Boshu, Savarkar way of thinking, mainly Savarkar way of thinking. It was an awareness of community that transcended the local, the immediate and the particular, or the various jati, sampradaya and spatial identities, spatial SPATIAL, spatial identities and engendered forms of Hindu collective action in the colonial public sphere and arenas. It was an awareness of community. Okay, ये देखो भाई, ये community है तुम्हारा. This process has been surveyed in some detail in chapter 3. It identifies the consistency of colonial administration or that of the colonial state in terms of its frameworks as one of the reasons behind the emergence of Hindu communitas. This will be a very interesting chapter personally for me कि colonial state ने ऐसा क्या किया कि ये एक नया brand of हिंदुत्ववादी हिंदुत्ववादी nationalists उठ के आए. These overrode the local and customary administrative practices that the indigenous polities had earlier co-opted and oppressed all Indians and Hindus, irrespective of class, social status, or corporative identity. Further, colonial rule provided Indians and Hindus with a common public sphere or discursive realm. ठीक है, एक बात करने का एक कॉमन लैंग्वेज वैसे हो गया था ना, इसलिए डिस्कर्सिव realm हो गया. Nitin, you are half right, of course. Shivaji's coronation was rejected by Brahminical forces, as was Shahu Maharaj's coronation. But फिर अलग ब्राह्मण लेके आए, उन लोगों ने तो सैंक्शन कर दिया ना. तो तुम यहाँ पे जो कोट एंड कोट ब्राह्मणिकल फोर्सेस बोल रहे हो, वो सिर्फ एक जगह के ब्राह्मण्स के बारे में बोल रहे हो, पूरे जगह के पूरे देश के ब्राह्मण्स के बारे में नहीं बोल रहे हो. Further, colonial rule provided Indians and Hindus with a common public sphere or discursive realm. It also psychologically cohered the Hindu elite by drawing them into a common pool of Western derived ideas due to which they took a collective critical look at their own society. कि हाँ भाई कुछ गलतियां है, कुछ खराब चीजें हो रहा है और कुछ बढ़िया चीजें भी है जिसको बचाना भी है. Further, due to the colonial context, there was greater articulation between the Hindu elites and non-elites. Since both were oppressed one way or the other by the colonial administration, the former, oftentimes, meaning the elites, oftentimes began to speak on behalf of the latter and took up their issues. The two segments of Hindu society also experienced the same cultural anxieties. Resultantly, multiple units of Hindu society now increasingly cohered to the extent as to undertake the same cultural causes and advocacies in the colonial public sphere. This phenomenon was abetted by the seeming cultural neutrality of the colonial state. It sought to treat all Indian religious groups even-handedly, and dislodgement of the Muslim elite or ashraf from positions of authority, which eroded the erstwhile hegemony of the Islamicate culture forms, which then led to the anxieties, which then led to the formation of Pakistan, as discussed in his book Seedbed of Pakistan. So, consequently, Hindus could now approach the colonial administration seeking the redress of cultural grievances and also forcefully self-assert through their own cultural symbols, the cow or the Hindi language, and public ceremonials. As Hindu communitas variously took shape, there was also the attempt to formulate it through nomenclature in the way of coinages such as Hinduism and Hindutva, in terms of core texts or a core value or practice. Alongside, it was further concretized by the various social reform efforts undertaken by the Hindu elites. They performed a vital service to Hindu communitas by addressing Hindu society at large and prescribing what they thought it needed. They, in this sense, developed and advanced an ecumenical vision for the entirety of Hindu society. Hindu social reform also anticipated the popular expressions of Hindu communitas when the Arya Samaj championed cow protection, the Sanskrit and Hindi languages, and the Devanagari script in the colonial public sphere. The popular or collective action-driven form of Hindu communitas, discussed at some length in the chapter, primarily emerged in the northwestern provinces and Oudh. NWP and O renamed the United Provinces of Agra and Oudh in 1902, and eventually the United Provinces in 1921, later Uttar Pradesh region. As we shall see, it pivoted around cow protection and the advocacy of Hindi Nagari, or Hindi written in the Devanagari script, as the administrative language of the province. A further, more geographically dispersed aspect of the popular form of Hindu communitas was large-scale public ceremonials in the urban spaces. In certain ways, deriving from the popular, the organizational expressions of Hindu communitas took the form of initiatives like the All India Hindu Mahasabha and the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS. Their emergence, growth, agenda, and activities are examined in the concluding segment of chapter 3. And by the way, guys, those of you who don't know already, do check out the proposed draft constitution of the Hindu Mahasabha, which I have discussed from one of my videos. And I shared it in my community tab a few days back. Check it out. It's pretty fascinating. It had all the rights as enshrined in the current constitution. It also had some other fun, cool rights as well. Okay, I won't talk about it. because my video might get demonetized, but there are fun stuff. It was more progressive and more modern than the current constitution we have. That much I can say. Their emergence, growth, and agenda of groups like Hindu Mahasabha and RSS and activities are examined in the concluding segment of chapter 3. So, chapter 4 of this book, ek minute, thoda pani, thoda coffee. So, chapter 4 of this book begins by examining the likely basis of the quote-unquote Congress system, or the seemingly unchallengeable electoral hegemony of the Congress party that prevailed in the first 2 decades of post-independent India. Thereafter, it documents certain non-starter attempts to provide political alternatives to the Congress and the circumstances that brought forth the Bharatiya Janasangh as a distinctive Hindu voice in Indian politics. The chapter identifies it as a votary of Hindu nationalism in terms of its sense of Indian nationhood, of the concomitant Sangathanist program, certain cultural advocacies inherited from the collective action-driven form of Hindu communitas in pre-independence India, and the Catholicity of outlook that it sought to bear upon the post-independent Indian nation. Okay, they're talking about BJS here. These various aspects of the Bharatiya Janasangh, it argues, were all overwritten by Hinduness. Later, the chapter will look at the circumstances surrounding the establishment of the BJP and identify it as an inheritor of the BJS's, Bharatiya Janasangh's, Hindu nationalism. A considerable portion of it covers the politics, projects, and electoral fortunes of Bharatiya Janasangh and the BJP, and charts, so to speak, the course of his nationalism in post-independent India. It concludes as the latter is on the way to its historic triumph in the general elections of 2014. The many endeavors of Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister of India, along with episodes in his life and political career, are examined in the penultimate chapter. It identifies him as a quintessential Hindu in terms of the outlook that overrides his politics, who is harmonizing history and the present and heralding a marvelous future for the nation. Okay, this is the end of the introduction. It's 18:25. I'll go offline now and come back to discuss something very interesting. So I'll go offline quickly, okay? तुम लोग डिबेट चलाते रहो. अब अभी 15-20 मिनट में ही मैं अगला लाइव स्ट्रीम में ही आऊंगा, तब भी हमारा डिबेट चलते रहेगा. We will discuss a recent speech given by Abhijit Banerjee on income inequality. Okay, so bye bye guys. Good night. Thank you for listening to this. Do buy the book from the affiliate link from our description box. It helps me. It helps Dr. Shomade. It helps our academia, narrative building, countering the left, etc., and pursuing truth. If in some places the left happens to say the truth and we fall short of the truth, then also we must be called out. But some other voices need to get into academia. So thank you guys for joining. Bye bye. Good night.
वंशवरूढं महाभीमं गुणाद्रष्टाम्बरप्रदम् अस्य युक्तं त्रिनेत्रं च कपालकर्णिकाकरां मुक्तकेशीं ललज्जयं पिबन्तीं रुधिरं चतुर्बाहुसमायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत् चतुर्बाहुसमायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत् काली काली